start. Today we're going to continue on the endocrine system. Yesterday I gave you an introduction on why we are studying it. Today we're going to start looking at the parts of it. I'd like you to pay special attention to how we are going to study the body systems in the weeks ahead. Every time you see that we are studying a system of the body, you'll find that the chapters are organized in a certain way. If you look at your notes, if you look at notes very carefully, you'll find that you will always organize it in this particular way if it has to do with a system. Endocrine system. First and foremost, you will always start with the introduction, 2.1. After we're done with the introduction, all systems, we want to start off by understanding what are the parts. Okay, so number one will always be intro. Number two, the parts. What is the next one? If you scroll down, what's the next section? What's the next broad one? Sorry? Functions, right? So if we know the parts, we want to know how they work together. Okay? So how do they work together to carry out its function? Last one, disruptions. This is where usually we learn about diseases of the particular system we are learning about. In this particular example, for endocrine system, if you scroll all the way down, the disease we are looking at is diabetes. It has to do with your endocrine system failing. So in every system that we're going to study, it will always be organized into introduction, parts, how they work together, then what happens if we disrupt it. Your SLS will also organize in this way, right? If you pay close attention. When will you see this? You'll see this in the endocrine system, which is what we are doing right now. Next chapter will be the nervous system. After that chapter, the respiratory system. After that will be renal system. You also see the reproductive system. You will see this again. So always organize this way. Why is this relevant to you? It helps you organize your thoughts and perhaps your notes. So every chapter that is related to a system, you can always have the parts. After you can identify the parts, then you must be aware of how they work with each other. After that, you must have the back of your mind some sort of disruption. What happens if one part of the system is damaged? How will it affect the entire system? Okay, with that in mind, you can organize your notes and your learning a little bit better. Okay, so just be aware of that. And today, so where are we today? Today we are at the parts. We're done with the intro. Today we're going to go on to the parts of the endocrine system. Then we can truly appreciate how they function together. So what are the parts? In today's lesson, we're going to learn about number one, the glands that produce the hormones. Number two, the messenger itself, the hormone. Let's begin first with a quick video on glands, what they are and how we differentiate them with other glands that we have in our body. And yesterday we had a short taste of that.
Endocrine glands and hormones. Glands are specialized tissues which secrete chemicals depending on how they release the chemical substances. Glands are of two types: exocrine glands and endocrine glands. Endocrine glands have no ducts, so these are called as ductless glands. These glands secrete chemical substances called hormones directly into blood. Blood carries hormones to all organs in the body. Hormones act on the cells of other organs and increase or decrease the metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. organs or make cells of the body to grow. They may even act on other endocrine glands and control their function. Tissues or organs on which hormones act are called target tissues or organs. Same hormones have different effects on different tissues. Similarly, different hormones may act on one target tissue. Hormones act at very specific sites in the body. A small amount of hormone, 1 by 10 million of a gram or even less, brings out large changes in the target tissue. Thus, hormones act as chemical messengers and trigger the chemical and physiological processes of target cells. They are slow in action. Their deficiency and excess are harmful, often leading to serious disorders.
Yeah, pause a while, right? If it hasn't been, you're not aware of it, the Haman that keeps popping up as hormone, the pronunciation is a bit different. I think this was computer generated. Okay? Okay, so just a little bit about endocrine glands you've heard so far. Now you will see a table appear that compares endocrine and exocrine glands. If you find this table useful, you can also access this video, you can screenshot, you can put it into your notes. Up to you.
Difference between exocrine and endocrine glands. Endocrine glands, exocrine glands. 1. The glands are devoid of ducts. The glands possess ducts. 2. They occur in isolation. They do not occur in isolation. 3. Their secretions are poured in the circulatory system. The glands pour their secretion over target directly or through ducts. 4. The target site is far away from its endocrine gland. Target site is adjacent to the gland. 5. Secretions consist of hormones. Secretions are enzymes, mucus, lubricants, and excretory substances.
Right. So we go back to that particular slide. I'd like to elaborate on some of the
Secretions
points.
are enzymes.
Okay, you can take this time also to value add to your notes. This is not in your notes. Yeah, just make it clear for you. This is not in your notes. Can you ignore point number 2? The teachers have no idea what they're talking about. Ignore point number 2. The rest of the points are very relevant. I'm going to elaborate soon on what these points mean. Don't want to write, just screenshot of your very text that we. Now I'll give you some examples so that we are a bit clearer on what this means. What I wrote on the board are just keywords. They are not in full sentence. If you get a compare and contrast question for endocrine and exocrine gland, you won't want to write in full sentences. Okay? Yes.
So those compare and contrast question, you cannot do like the table thing.
Can. Okay. So to reiterate, if you get a compare and contrast question, can you do a table? Can. But you do one more thing for me. Right now, I sort of have a table. Right? But one thing you should have that's extra would be there should be one more column at the side which tells me what you're comparing. So whether could be like presence of duct. Presence of duct. Endocrine glands, no duct present. Ducts are present. They're not quite. Next, secrete into bloodstream. Secrete substance directly to target site. So perhaps it could be site of secretion. So when you compare and contrast, if you want to use a table, you must do this extra step of telling me what you are comparing. If you are not doing this method, you want to write it up in sentences, then make sure each point you are comparing, you directly compare sentence by sentence. Do not write down all the characteristics of endocrine gland in one thick paragraph, then you go and write another thick paragraph on exocrine glands. That's not the way to compare and contrast. Instead, you must make a direct comparison each time. Right now, I'm going to elaborate on what these points mean. So, because when you understand, then you memorize less. More logic, you can just apply. 1,400 words. But it's okay, right, Alpha? I need a new iPad, Alpha. Maybe you can just give it a push. So what are we learning today? Today we're just going to focus on two things. Number one, we need to define what a hormone is, which is the next part. But we started off first with this. Distinguish endocrine and exocrine glands. You must be able to tell apart the two. Right after this, there's an example. And I want you to try to tell apart whether it's an endocrine or exocrine gland. Let me elaborate on all 4 points now so that you understand, do not memorize. First point, endocrine glands are ductless. Exocrine glands have ducts. What does that mean? Okay, I think the better way to understand this would be what are ducts. Ducts, it's very hard to pronounce, okay, is a tube. Ducts are nothing more than tubes. These tubes connect to whatever the gland is. This gland could be maybe a sweat gland. It could be an oil gland. What other glands do we have that I was talking about yesterday? Salivary glands. Sorry, is a hair follicle? Oh, it's not. A hair follicle is not a gland. I know what I've drawn here looks like a hair. Okay, a hair follicle is not a gland. Hair follicle is the point where new hair is being grown from. Okay, but it's not a gland. Okay, so this is a gland. More specifically, it's an exocrine gland. And exocrine glands always have ducts. Where do these ducts extrude out into? Often it extrudes directly to the target site. And I can give you a few examples now. Supposing it's a sweat gland, the target site will be the skin. Okay, let's write some. Skin. If it's oil gland, okay, actually also skin also have. Actually we also have mucus glands. If it's mucus, then perhaps, where do you secrete mucus? In your nose, right? So in your nose. Salivary glands. In your mouth. So directly to the target. If you want to do a quick match, you can also match it. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's what ducts are. And so, endocrine glands are ductless. Let me give you an example of endocrine gland. The one that you are going to learn about, okay, let me think of one that I don't give away the answer of. The pituitary gland that you came across already. Am I right? Pituitary gland. This is an example of a gland that is located within the brain. It has no ducts, no tube, nothing. But then we have a problem. If there's no tubes to which the secretion can go out from, then how does it reach its target site? Well, it does it through directly secreting to the bloodstream. Often you'll find endocrine glands, like the pituitary gland, they often come with lots of blood vessels that surround them. Lots and lots of blood vessels. That's how the hormones will eventually get to where they need to go. They make use of our circulatory system. This is where I would like to add one more layer for you now, so that since you're a little bit more comfortable, our blood vessels do not often directly touch endocrine glands or even our organs. All organs, everything that's inside you is bathed with a kind of fluid. And that fluid is called tissue fluid. Okay, tissue fluid is what surrounds our glands, our endocrine glands, our organs. You may ask, what is tissue fluid? It's primarily water. We are how many percent water? 70, 75? Yeah. So what does this mean for you? To be very clear, endocrine glands secrete hormones that travel into the tissue fluid and then into the bloodstream. Okay? It does not go immediately to the blood. It goes to the fluid outside first, then from the fluid going to the blood. Okay? Just be extremely clear. In other words, here are a lot of colors. It goes to the fluid, then it goes into the blood. Whereas for exocrine gland, travels via the duct, direct to the target site. Very efficient. Yes?
But if in the exam we just say like secretes it directly into the blood, do you get that?
You see how strict the marker is, not? Yeah. Usually I have to say, teacher wants to know that you understand that for hormones to reach its target site, it needs to travel via bloodstream. That is usually what they focus on. But if you want to be very particular about it, it doesn't immediately go into the blood, it goes to the surrounding fluid, then go to the blood. Okay, so we talk about two things. The idea of ducts, and the second is, where does it go? One goes to the target site directly, one needs to go via the transport system first, then you'll reach the target site. And that relates to point number 3. Actually, for a lot of the target sites for endocrine glands, they're actually very far away. Whereas target sites for the exocrine glands tend to be immediately quite close to where it's supposed to produce it. Yes? Why don't the blood vessel touch the gland? Why? Well, this is a hard question to answer. Why? Okay, perhaps my best response would be because there's tissue fluid there. Yeah. I cannot say that it does not touch it. It could touch, but what I'm saying is that actually there's this fluid that surrounds most of our internal organs and endocrine glands. If you press your blood vessels to the endocrine gland or the organ, technically it will push away the tissue fluid, right, in between. Then it will touch, right? So I think my point is, in a normal state, your organs are all bathed with tissue fluid, and then the blood vessels, they are that layer after. It could touch if you compress and bring it closer along. But why then do you need tissue fluid? We are creatures that move a lot, right? we need some sort of that buffer, that lubricant. Buffer in the sense that if you accidentally punch yourself, you know that what you're punching, at least the tissue fluid absorbs a lot of shock first. Second, as you move a lot, at least there's some lubricant between your organs or your muscles and whatnot. Minus the tissue fluid, you're just this rather stiff creature, muscle, everything directly touching each other. Can you imagine with every push and pull, you directly rub your muscle against your organ, or wear and tear happens quite fast. Okay? Yes? Yeah. Okay, good question. Should we ask, yesterday I asked you all to touch the bottom of your tongue, right? Yeah? Is that the gland you're touching? Or is that the duct? I would say what you're trying to touch there is the opening of the duct. Okay? So underneath your tongue, you want to try again. Right? Open up. Underneath your tongue, there's this like two small little holes there. That is the opening. But beneath the opening, there's the duct that connects to these salivary glands. Yes?
Wait, so if there's no duct, right, then if the pituitary gland want to secrete something, then it goes up by diffusion.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm glad you're bringing up ideas of transport from last year. Good. So then how does it reach the tissue fluid as well as blood vessels? It makes use of transport processes that you learned last year. Diffusion. From high concentration to low concentration. Okay? Yeah, so good that you got this up. Last but not least, the nature of what is being secreted. Endocrine glands, hormones. Exocrine glands, you notice whatever we are secreting, they're actually not messengers of any sort. Yeah? Enzymes, not a messenger, they do something. Mucus, not a messenger. Sweat, oil, saliva, they're not messengers. They have a purpose. Hormones, on the other hand, they are chemical messengers. And as the name suggests, messengers send message. Hormones in itself doesn't do anything but serve more like a letter. A letter from one place to another to tell the next place to do something. Take a hormone and put it on food, it will not digest food. Take a hormone, hormone also cannot evaporate to help you cool down like sweat. Hormone's purpose is purely to serve as a message. And to receive the message, you need receptors eventually on your target cells. And that is a broad comparison of what an endocrine and exocrine gland differences are. If you feel confident about the differences, then we have a very interesting case study, the pancreas. I would like you to look at this image here. I've labeled quite a number of things in this image of what the pancreas is. I would like you to figure out whether the pancreas is an exocrine or endocrine gland. It is a gland. Yeah, I'll just be upfront with it, it's a gland. Or is it endocrine or exocrine gland? Can we make use of characteristics we've already learned to decipher whether it is endocrine or exocrine? That is the challenge. And that's what we expect you to be able to do. Okay, I'd like you to try now. I'd like to hear from you. I'll know if you are participating and involved in the lesson. If you fill up the blanks here, then we can hear from you. You may do it with your friend and team together. I just want to hear your views. The entire pancreas. So is the entire pancreas, is it an endocrine gland or an exocrine gland? What are the clues that give it away? Someone say blood vessels. They notice their blood vessels. Enveloping the pancreas. Any other clues? you've got your thoughts, will you pen it down? Then we will hear from everyone what they think. Endocrine, exocrine. Once you're done keying in, view your friends' responses. Okay, our responses are streaming in. So what's the verdict? Okay, let's have a look. Jeanette says it's an endocrine gland because there are hormones produced. Okay, we kind of check that box over here. And the hormones, she gave specific example, insulin and glucagon. Next, Hao Yang says it's an exocrine because it has ducts. Where's the duct? Pancreatic duct. You see the green one? Pancreatic duct. You see over here? There's a duct that leads out directly into the duodenum. I don't know how much you remember of your JH2 life, but you learn about the pancreas in your JH2 life. Okay? Okay, so Hao Yang says, but it's an exocrine gland because it has ducts. Rohit says it's an exocrine gland because it has ducts. It also has a bile duct. Okay, if you recall at JH2 years, the bile duct is connected to another pouch, and that pouch is not directly connected to the pancreas. It's a separate pouch. Okay, but here on the right, pancreas does have a duct. It's called pancreatic duct. So it says exocrine because it does not secrete hormones. It secretes to the target site directly. What is the target site? The duodenum. What does the pancreas secrete into the duodenum? Enzymes, okay? Pancreas secretes enzymes directly into the target site, the duodenum. But earlier on, Jeanette says it secretes hormones also, if you read very carefully. Insulin and glucagon. Henry says exocrine produces hormones. Because Henry observes that there are blood vessels surrounding it. Fair enough. Okay, I want to make this point out. Actually, all our organs also have blood vessels surrounding it. All our organs have blood vessels surrounding it. Correct? Correct, right? Why do our organs also need blood vessels to surround them? For nutrients, yeah, for nutrients. Okay, so Zunyi says exocrine gland. Okay, so I reiterate, this is a structural thing, but it's okay from our JH2 years, quite long ago. Bile duct is not part of pancreas. It is very close to the pancreas. Pancreatic duct, that is part of the pancreas. And synapse cells also directly secrete digestive enzymes. Okay? So she thinks it's exocrine for this reason. Because enzymes. Let's look at the other responses, whether anything new. Nabila says that, okay, secretes hormones directly in the circulatory system. So perhaps it's endocrine. Ella believes it's exocrine because enzymes are produced and directly into its target site. Yi-Chen thinks it's endocrine because as it is an organ inside the body. And it also secretes enzymes, so it could be both. Yi-Chen is on the fence. Could be both. Yi-Chen says exocrine because enzymes direct to the duodenum, part of small intestines. Charmaine, both. Because enzymes and hormones. And then got duct. but also got blood vessels come carry away the hormones. So which? We chose this example because it's one of the beautiful examples where it's both. Yeah? This is a gland that is both an exocrine and endocrine gland. How is this possible? Because the pancreas as an organ comes with some cells that are endocrine in nature, produce hormones directly into bloodstream, tissue fluid and bloodstream. It also contains a lot of cells that primarily produce enzymes that go into ducts. So the only reason why the pancreas is both an endocrine and exocrine gland is because it actually has cells to do both functions. It also has duct, no duct. So it is a beautiful example. And we like to use this example because it as with a lot of things in biology that we teach you, they are just models, generalizations. But when we go into specific case studies, we see that sometimes it overlaps. The more you open your mind, the easier it is for you to cross-apply different knowledge. Just like Jenna Finya was asking about transport systems. Okay? We'll pause here for a while for you to take down notes. But after that, we are done with endocrine glands. What do I expect of you? I expect that you are able to compare and contrast endocrine and exocrine. I also expect you to be able to, if we provide you a new gland, you apply your knowledge to distinguish. I'm actually not quite aware if there are other examples that are endocrine and exocrine together. If you want to prepare yourself for case studies, you can look it up. But pancreas is our favorite case study. Yes.
So the pancreas is the only gland that we will be looking into, then the rest is just
That's not true. The pancreas is the gland we will focus on for this chapter's case study. Actually, in our previous chapter on when we look at regulation of temperature, was there a gland? Don't have, no glands there. No glands, right? That one you don't have. The next gland that you will learn in subsequent chapters, which we saw in that video many times, the salt water floating the sea on, right? It's a pituitary gland.
For the thyroid and like the rest, we don't have to know.
All those thyroid gland, adrenal gland that produce adrenaline. All I can say is they could be case studies. If you want to not be shocked by a brand new context or case study, then you can go and read up a bit more. Then if we show you any one of these new glands, you actually are prepared for it. But supposing you don't do that, I say it's fine also. Because if you understand this, you apply it on the spot. But to answer Kara's question, we will spend a lot of time on the pancreas as one of the glands, and the pituitary gland as another gland. I cannot think of other glands that we spend a lot of time on for your biology. In the final 15 minutes, we will spend our time closing on parts of the endocrine system. What are hormones exactly? We keep saying hormones are chemical messengers. But actually, what are hormones? Every time we ask you what is something made of in biology, I hope that your natural instinct is to go back to biomolecules and ask yourself, is it made up of carbohydrates? Is it made up of proteins? Is it made up of nucleic acids? Is it made up of lipids? So that's a question you can always ask yourself, regardless of where we are in biology. can I ask this question all the time? So what are hormones made up of? Okay, this video will quickly summarize the types of hormones that exist, and then I would like you to draw from that video what kind of biomolecules hormones are typically made up of.
Hormones can be made from different chemical substances. Broadly, we can group them into water-soluble hormones and fat-soluble hormones. We'll start by looking at the water-soluble hormones. These include catecholamines, a group which includes adrenaline. In America, adrenaline is called epinephrine. Peptide hormones are also water-soluble. They're made from just a few amino acids connected together, while protein and glycoprotein hormones are also made from amino acids, but they're much bigger. These hormones can be stored in vesicles within a cell, and they're released as required by exocytosis. Water-soluble hormones will travel then in the blood, but they can't easily cross cell membranes because cell membranes are made of phospholipids, and water-soluble hormones can't penetrate that. So the water-soluble hormones need to work through receptors found on the membrane itself. If a receptor becomes activated, it initiates a series of events inside the cell. And sometimes you get what's called a cascade mechanism. Let's imagine that a particular receptor has been activated. It will then go on to activate a number of molecules inside the cell, and we can call those molecule N, let's say. Then each molecule N can go on to activate a number of molecules of a different type, which we'll call molecule P. Each of those will go on to activate another type of molecule called molecule C.
If I were to summarize this is the effect type. Okay? The effects can be different for different cells. When a hormone binds to the receptor, it can cause an effect. Right? You do not need to know this cascade mechanism. They're just showing you a little bit more. Okay, so we skip that, and then we'll go into the next kind of hormones.
Across cell membranes. And because of this, water-soluble hormones are often excluded from acting on the brain because of the blood-brain barrier. What about initial transporter on the blood will get us liberated soluble hormones? Fat-soluble hormones, also known as lipid-soluble hormones, most famously include steroid hormones such as testosterone, estrogen, and cortisol. But there are other types as well, such as the thyroid hormones, for example, thyroxine. Lipid-soluble hormones can cross through the lipid bilayers, which make up vesicle membranes and cell membranes relatively easily. And that means that they can't be stored in vesicles, and they tend to be produced on demand. They're not water-soluble though, so they need to travel in the blood plasma bound to special carrier proteins. And those proteins protect the hormones from breakdown as well. So these types of hormones usually hang around for longer than water-soluble hormones, and they have half-lives of hours or days in the blood. If they're going to work on a cell, first they have to unbind from their carrier proteins, and once they've done that, they can pass right through the cell membranes and activate receptors within the cell itself. Receptors can be in the cytoplasm or even in the nucleus. Once they've bound to their receptor, fat-soluble hormones will increase or decrease gene expression, and that affects the function of the cell in the long term, over a period of hours or days.
Okay, so broadly speaking, actually we have two classes of hormones. Those that can dissolve in water, those that can dissolve in lipids. And if you are sharp in catching the kind of biomolecules that hormones are made up of, actually we have quite a few. For yourself, may I just get you to focus on two kinds of hormones that you have learned, of which the biomolecules you have learned about. Okay, you've learned about proteins. Yeah, actually some hormones are peptide in nature, polypeptides. Some hormones are lipid in nature, steroids. Okay, and I think these are two good examples of the types of hormones because you are aware of these kinds of biomolecules. Whereas enzymes are always proteins, right, based on what we learned, hormones, some are polypeptide in nature, some are lipid in nature. But depending on its nature, it can affect how what kind of receptors it will bind to eventually. And it all boils down to what we learned in JH3. That's why JH3 topics are important. When we look at peptides, they are usually quite soluble. Or in other words, remember this word, hydrophilic. Usually proteins outside are lots of hydrophilic amino acids, R groups. If they're hydrophilic means that actually they cannot cross the cell's membrane very easily. Right? In other words, water-soluble hormones tend to bind to receptors on the cell membrane. Why? Because it cannot pass through the hydrophobic core of the, remember all these are phospholipid bilayer. So all JH3 knowledge. Why am I saying this to you? I'm drawing explicitly the links to JH3. Okay, we'll pause here for a while. Any questions? You can raise now, and then before I elaborate on this one. Yes, yeah.
So does the water-soluble hormones are the ones that pass through the bloodstream?
Okay. Are water-soluble hormones the only ones that take advantage of the circulatory system to reach the target site? No. Lipid-soluble hormones also make use of the circulatory system. But perhaps to answer your question, are you thinking, hey, it cannot dissolve in water, then cannot transport through our system? Right. So there is a problem there. Lipid-soluble hormones, this is out of your syllabus, tends to have an additional chemical that will bind to it so that it can dissolve in our bloodstream and travel through it. So it has actually an additional carrier. Okay, but it's out of your syllabus. Okay, but good question. You're applying your knowledge, yeah, of understanding. Yes.
So it points to the receptors. Then what does it do?
Okay. So let's say I have a water-soluble hormone right now. It cannot pass through the cell membrane, right? And therefore, it tends to bind to receptors. Here I'm drawing a receptor here on the cell membrane surface. So Henry's question is, after it binds, what happens? Does it stay there? Usually, in the long run, it will eventually detach or it may be destroyed. But what happens after it binds? After it binds, it will send a signal to the cell that, hey, you need to carry out your effect as an effector. Whatever the effect is supposed to be, to counteract the change or whatnot. Can you answer the question?
Wait.
Yes.
The lipid.
Soluble one.
It binds to
Then, if you're all comfortable, we're going to start going to lipid-soluble ones. Okay? If water-soluble cannot pass through cell membrane, so it tends to bind to receptors on the cell membrane surface. Then we'll answer Vinya's question about, then what about lipid-soluble steroids, hormones? What kind of receptors do they bind to? Yes?
Does it make any difference whether the receptor is like on the cell membrane or in the cell?
I would say most likely yes. But to my limited knowledge, I do not know exactly how that difference plays out. Yeah. So I think I have to say I do not know. That is a too cheap question for my limited knowledge. But if I notice something, I notice that lipid-soluble hormones. Okay, we'll go into this in a while. Are you all quite okay? We're going to go to lipid-soluble now. Okay, lipid-soluble hormones, on the other hand, as the name suggests, is lipid-soluble. That means it can pass through the hydrophobic core of the cell membrane, right? In fact, it can pass through any sort of membrane. It can even pass through the nucleus membrane. So, lipid-soluble hormones, in blue over here, they tend to be able to pass through the cell membrane and bind to receptors that are present within the cell. These receptors could be floating around in the cell, cytoplasm, or we have the nucleus here. There are some receptors that are present inside the nucleus. Both the nucleus membrane and the cell membrane, the hormones can penetrate through, and they can also bind to the receptors. Cannot. So lipid-soluble hormones cannot interact. Can interact with the hydrophobic core and it can pass through. Okay, so if we recall from last year, when we look at a phospholipid bilayer layer, the hydrophobic core is very thick. That is the main barrier. The hydrophilic layer is very thin actually. The phospholipid layer is quite thin. Okay? So whether or not something can pass through or not is whether it can interact with this thick hydrophobic core.
So it goes through by diffusion.
Correct. It goes through by diffusion.
Then this one don't even go through. The water-soluble one
Doesn't go through. Okay? So this one can go through, right? It can go all the way to the nucleus. It can go into bind to receptors and the cytoplasm. Why are we learning this? So that we understand that if you are given a peptide hormone, you can use your JH403 knowledge to slowly infer that you will have to bind to a receptor on the cell membrane surface because it cannot pass through the cell membrane. If I give you a hormone that is lipid in nature, you apply your JH403 knowledge. If it's lipid, it means it can pass through cell membrane, right? That means the receptors it's binding to must be inside the cell. And that is the reason why we are learning the different types of hormones. Yes, Shamika? Okay, good question. Can the lipid-soluble hormone bind to receptors on the cell membrane? No. Okay, why? Receptors are kind of like enzymes in the idea that they are complementary shapes. Every hormone has a receptor that is complementary to itself that it can bind to. It's just that sometimes it's on inside or on the cell membrane surface depending on the nature of the hormone. So to answer Shavika's question, does it really matter actually? Then why the body sometimes it's peptide, sometimes it's steroid hormone? If it doesn't seem to matter. If I were to nitpick a little bit, I notice that steroid hormones, because they can penetrate through membrane layers and it can go inside the nucleus, I notice that lipid hormones tend to be able to directly influence transcription translation. That means it directly controls the cell's effect by modifying how fast or slow it transcribes DNA to mRNA, so on and so forth. That's what I noticed. It directly controls the brain of the cell, the nucleus. So to end off today, 2 more minutes. This is an example of how I may assess your understanding of this part. Here is a hormone called estrogen, found in females and in males. Males, you also have estrogen, just not as much. Females have a lot of it. If you look at this particular hormone, can you tell which statement is true? And that will be your homework for this weekend. Okay? Just one MCQ. The next time I see you in class, we will try out practice makes progress together. Or if you want to have a head start, you can already try it out because it is not difficult. Okay, just select answers. Yes,
But I feel like if you want to travel through by simple, you should just small.
you're right. It has to be small or the big. Actually, it is steroid in comparison to the phospholipid bilayer, and the phospholipid is quite small. Can. Okay, you know what's big? Proteins are big. Actually, another reason why it cannot pass through cell membrane. Okay, and that's all for today. Alpha, may I get you to stop the video?